It's about how I discovered the ugly truth about my wife. How I uncovered every dark secret she thought she had hidden. Hey, I'm Alan, and what I'm about to share with you is not just a story. It's my story of love. It's betrayal and revenge that shook my life to its core. They say the human mind knows the truth long before the heart accepts it. For me, it all started with a gut feeling. It's that quiet whisper in the back of my mind telling me something wasn't right. My wife's life, on the surface, looked normal. Work, kids, family. But I started noticing small cracks in the routine. A late return home here, a sudden change of plans there. She smiled, she laughed, she acted the same. But deep down, I felt distance. It wasn't one big thing. It was 1,000 little details, stacking up, whispering louder each day. She's hiding something from you. At first, I tried to silence it, convince myself I was overthinking, but that voice didn't fade. It only grew stronger, and I was about to find out. My instincts were dead right. The strange thing is, it wasn't me who first gave shape to my suspicions. It was my kids. They were young, then just 4 and 6. At that age, kids don't lie. Not about the little things. They just talk. Innocent, open, unfiltered. And every time they came home, they had new stories about spending the day at their grandparents' house. Now, under normal circumstances, that wouldn't have raised an eyebrow. Grandparents love their grandkids, and it's always a joy for them. But here's the thing, my wife's parents lived an hour and a half away. 90 minutes, one way. And somehow my wife was taking them there 2 or 3 times a week. I couldn't make sense of it. Why would she spend hours on the road just to drop them off for a few hours, only to drive all the way back again? Something about it gnawed at me. And while the kids thought it was just playtime with Grandma and Grandpa, I started to realize it was more than that, much more. Eventually, I couldn't hold it in any longer. One evening, while she was folding laundry, I asked her straight out, "Why are you spending so much time at your parents' place? Why are the kids there so often?" She didn't even look me in the eye. She just shrugged, said something about helping her mom around the house, and then quickly changed the subject. But the way she said it, the pause before she answered, the nervous twitch in her smile, I knew she was lying. You see, my wife was never a good liar. She thought she was clever, but I could read her too well. Every excuse felt rehearsed, every word carefully placed, but none of it felt natural. That was the moment the seed of doubt fully bloomed into certainty. My gut feeling wasn't paranoia. It was truth. Her weak denials only confirmed what I already knew deep down. She was hiding something from me, something she couldn't admit. Once I realized her excuses weren't adding up, I decided it was time to stop asking questions and start looking for answers. I began small. Every morning before she left, I would quietly check her car's odometer and jot down the mileage in a little notebook I kept hidden in my desk. When she came home, I'd check again. Day after day, week after week, I tracked every single mile. And that's when the truth started to reveal itself. She was driving nearly 400 extra miles every single week. 400 miles that didn't match her work schedule, didn't match errands, and certainly didn't match quick trips to her parents' house. That's when it hit me. Those miles, they told a story of their own, a story she thought she could keep off the books. The numbers didn't lie. And soon, neither would she. Sometimes cheaters get caught not because you're clever, but because they're careless. And my wife made the kind of mistake you only make once. One afternoon, I sat down at our family computer to check some emails. Right there on the desk was a little yellow sticky note. On it, in her handwriting, were 4 words and a number. Her AOL password. She had just left it there and guarded like a key to a locked door. My heart pounded in my chest. I stared at that note for what felt like hours. I knew if I typed it in, there was no going back. Part of me wanted to stay blind. But the other part, the part that needed the truth, took control. I logged in. And with every click, every folder I opened, I felt the walls of my marriage start to crumble. What I was about to read would change everything. The inbox was full. Harmless messages, family updates, work notes. But then I saw them. Emails to and from her so-called best friend from college. At first, it looked like casual chatter, but then the tone shifted. The words became darker, sharper. They weren't just talking about catching up on life. They were laughing. Laughing about me. Laughing about my trust. And worst of all, they were talking about her secret. In plain words, my wife admitted she was sleeping with her ex-boyfriend from high school. She described the meetings, bragged about the excitement, and even mocked his wife, making fun of how she had let herself go after having kids. My stomach turned as I read line after line. It wasn't just betrayal, it was cruelty. She wasn't just cheating on me, she was enjoying it, reveling in it. And as I sat there in front of the screen, I realized the marriage I thought I had was already gone. I didn't slam the laptop shut. I didn't scream or confront her right away. No, I stayed calm, because now I had something far more valuable than suspicion. I had evidence. I hit print. One by one, the pages slid out of the printer. Every email, every word, every cruel joke, and every detail of her affair. Ink on paper, undeniable. I carefully gathered them, tucked them away in a folder, and hid them where she would never find them. These weren't just letters, these were bullets. Proof I could fire when the time was right. As I placed that folder out of sight, I told myself, don't rush, don't make a move until you're ready. Because the truth wasn't just mine to know anymore, it was mine to use. Proof in hand, I knew what she was doing. But I didn't yet know how she was doing it. Where, when, with who, exactly. If I was going to end this marriage, I wasn't going in half prepared. That's when I reached out to an old friend, someone I trusted, a cop I'd known for years. I told him enough to explain the situation, enough for him to understand that I needed answers. His response was simple. I know a guy. Enter Ron, a former police officer, now a private investigator. A man whose job was to uncover secrets, and he was damn good at it. I paid his retainer, handed over the emails, and told him everything I knew. Ron didn't waste time. He nodded, scribbled a few notes, and said, I'll find out exactly what she's up to. When I'm done, there won't be any doubt left. In that moment, I felt a shift. For weeks, I had been stumbling in the dark, second-guessing myself. But now I had someone on my side, someone who would drag the truth out into the light, no matter how ugly it was. Ron went to work like a machine. Days turned into weeks, and during that time, he tracked everything. He followed her car, noting the times and the routes. He logged every stop, every turn, every place she visited. And then came the photos, grainy at first, but sharp enough to tell the story. The pattern was crystal clear. She'd load our kids into the car, drive them 90 minutes to her parents' house, drop them off with a smile, and then head straight into town. Lunch with him, always the same man, and afterward, seedy rundown motel. The timestamps lined up perfectly. The details were undeniable. 2 hours in that motel, then back to her parents, pick up the kids, and return home like nothing ever happened. When Ron handed me the report, thick with photos, dates, and times, I didn't just see betrayal. I saw a double life laid bare on paper. The secret routine she thought was hidden forever was now in my hands. When I flipped through Ron's report, each page cut deeper than the last. There she was, smiling across the table at him, holding his hand in broad daylight. There she was, slipping into a cheap motel, thinking nobody in the world was watching. But someone was. And now, so was I. I remember sitting alone at the kitchen table late that night, the folder spread open in front of me. My hands trembled as I stared at the photographs. A strange part of me wanted to rip them to pieces, to destroy the evidence so it could all just vanish. But the other part of me, the stronger part, knew better. This wasn't paranoia. This wasn't suspicion. It was fact. My wife was living a lie, and I was living inside it. The weight of it crushed me for a moment, but then something else rose in me. Resolve. If she thought she could shatter my family in secret, she was about to learn her choices had consequences, and I was ready to face the truth head on. That night, as I sat staring at the evidence of her betrayal, I felt an old wound tear open inside me. My parents had done the same thing to each other when I was a kid. Bare screaming matches, broken trust destroyed our home. My brothers and I were left to pick up the pieces of a shattered childhood. I swore back then that I would never, ever let that kind of chaos poison my own kids' lives. Yet here I was staring at photos that proved history was repeating itself. Through the woman I trusted most, I looked at the faces of my children in a framed picture on the mantels, smiling, innocent, unaware of the storm that was brewing. They didn't deserve this. They didn't deserve the lies, the fights, the destruction I had grown up with. In that moment, my path became clear. I wasn't just fighting for myself. I was fighting to protect my kids from the same hell I had lived through. And if that meant ending the marriage to save them, then so be it. The very next morning, I picked up the phone and called a divorce lawyer. My hands shook a little as I dialed, but once the voice on the other end answered, I felt a strange calm wash over me. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. This was about strategy. Sitting in that office, I laid out everything. The emails, the PI's report, the photographs, the late nights, the endless lies. The lawyer listened without judgment, nodding as he flipped through the stack of evidence. Finally, he looked up and said words that hit me like a hammer. We can work with this. Let's get started. In that moment, the balance of power shifted. For weeks, I had been in the dark, guessing, suspecting, doubting myself. But now I was armed. I wasn't just a betrayed husband anymore. I was a man with a plan. The papers were drawn up, the stage was being set, and soon she would be served. Right when she least expected it. Catching my wife was only half the story. To truly understand the scope of this betrayal, I needed to know who the other man was. What kind of person willingly sleeps with another man's wife? Who was he beneath the surface? That's when I leaned on Ron again. My private investigator had already proven his worth, but this time I asked him to dig deeper, not into my wife, but into her partner in crime. I wanted everything: his name, his background, his family, his career, all of it. A few days later, Ron handed me another folder. Inside was the life of a man named Bob, married, 3 kids, vice president of sales at his father-in-law's company. On paper, he was living the dream stable job, big house, family man, but behind closed doors, he was tearing 2 families apart. As I studied those pages, my anger boiled into something sharper. Bob wasn't just a faceless stranger anymore. He was real. He had a wife who trusted him, children who looked up to him, a career that depended on the respect of others. And suddenly I knew. I wasn't the only one who deserved the truth. With the divorce papers ready and Bob's secret sitting in my hands, it was time to connect the pieces. This wasn't just about catching them. It was about timing, the right moment, the right place, the maximum impact. I sat at my kitchen table one night, the documents spread out before me. On one side, the evidence of my wife's betrayal. On the other, the details of Bob's life, his wife, his job, his reputation. That's when the idea crystallized. My wife would be served at her workplace, surrounded by colleagues, with nowhere to hide. And at the very same time, Bob's carefully constructed world would be ripped apart because his wife deserved to know the truth. I wasn't going to shout. I wasn't going to fight. I was going to let the truth do all the damage. Quiet, surgical, precise. In that moment, I realized something powerful. Revenge doesn't always have to be loud. Sometimes the sharpest blade is silence and timing. The morning of the big day, I woke up before the alarm. My heart was steady, my mind clear. Everything was ready: the papers, the pie, the plan. All that was left was execution. I dropped the kids off at school like any other day, kissed them on the forehead, and wished them a good day. They had no idea that by nightfall, their world and mine would never look the same again. My wife went to work as usual, walking straight into the trap she never saw coming. At the exact same time, Ron the Pie drove across town with another folder, only this one wasn't meant for me. It was meant for Bob's wife. 2 houses of cards about to collapse. 2 liars about to face the weight of their own choices. As I sat in my car, waiting for the phone call. As I sat in my car waiting for the phone call to confirm it had all been done, I wasn't nervous anymore. I wasn't scared. I felt something different. I felt free. It was my afternoon when my lawyer's assistant walked into my wife's workplace. She thought it was just another ordinary day at the office, laughing with her coworkers, sipping her coffee. She didn't notice the man in a suit until he stopped right at her desk. He asked her name, she confirmed. Then he handed her the envelope. "You've been served." I wasn't there, but I didn't have to be. I'd pictured the scene 100 times. The moment her smile dropped, the way the color drained from her face. The whispers of her coworkers as she tried to gather herself. She couldn't deny it anymore. The lies, the excuses, they were over. In that one instant, the mask she had worn for years shattered. The truth was no longer hidden in secret emails or locked away in cheap motels. It was public, visible, real. And while she was trying to catch her breath, trying to figure out how everything had just fallen apart, another storm was already breaking over Bob's house. While my wife was reeling at her desk, across town, Ron knocked on a quiet suburban door. Bob's wife answered, probably thinking it was just another ordinary day. Instead, she was handed a truth that would detonate her world. Ron sat with her at the kitchen table, opening the folder I had paid for photos. Times, dates, proof that her husband wasn't the man she thought he was. At first, she shook her head, disbelief in her eyes. But as the evidence piled up in front of her, the denial faded into something else: shock, rage, heartbreak. She had been living in a lie just like me. And now, she finally saw it for what it was. Ron told me later that she didn't cry right away. No, she grew cold, quiet, focused. She asked for copies of everything. She wanted every piece of proof. That was when I knew Bob wasn't just going to face consequences at home. His entire life was about to be ripped apart. 2 betrayals, 2 confrontations, both detonating at the same time. And I didn't lift a finger beyond shining a light on the truth. The lies were enough to destroy them. The beauty of truth is that once it's out, you can't shove it back into the shadows. By the end of that day, the damage had already started spreading like wildfire. My wife didn't come home after being served. She stayed with her parents, probably too embarrassed to even face me. I imagine the silence in their house was deafening questions from her. Family she couldn't answer without digging herself deeper. On the other side of town, Bob walked into his own private hurricane. His wife confronted him the moment he stepped through the door, shoving Ron's photos in his face. Every excuse he tried to give fell apart against the weight of proof. The shouting spilled into the street. Neighbors watching from behind curtains as their perfect little family image shattered. By nightfall, 2 marriages were on fire, 2 cheaters caught in their own web, and me. I sat at home in the quiet, sipping a drink, listening to the clock tick on the wall. For the first time in months, I didn't feel paranoid. I didn't feel like I was losing my mind. I felt calm because I knew this was only the beginning. The next few weeks were brutal for Bob. His wife didn't just throw him out, she dismantled his world. First, she cleaned out their joint bank account. Every dollar he thought he could fall back on was gone overnight. Then she packed up their 3 kids and left the house. Bob wasn't just a cheater anymore, he was a man alone. But the real blow came from her father. See, Bob had built his career on connections, not talent. He was a VP of sales only because his father-in-law owned the business. Once the truth came out, that job evaporated instantly. Fired, blacklisted, done, and the house Bob lived in, that wasn't really his either. His in-laws owned it. With one phone call, he was evicted. No family, no job, no home. The man who thought he could sneak around in cheap motels and live without consequences suddenly had nothing. Every safety net he had counted on gone. Meanwhile, I didn't have to lift a finger. Bob's own choices were burning his life to the ground. And honestly, I enjoyed every second of watching it happen from a distance. If Bob thought losing his job and his home was the worst of it, he was dead wrong. The real punishment was just beginning his divorce. His wife came after him with everything she had: custody of the kids, every asset they had ever shared. She wasn't just hurt, she was determined to make him pay, and the courts didn't show him any mercy. With Ron's evidence, plus Bob's sudden unemployment, the case was stacked against him from the start. Their fights weren't just in courtrooms. Neighbors whispered about screaming matches in the driveway, police being called more than once. It was chaos spilling into the open, their private war becoming public entertainment. At one point, he even heard through Ron that Bob had tried to play the victim, blaming his wife, blaming me, blaming anyone but himself. But every time he opened his mouth, more proof shut him down. And as his divorce dragged on, the money bled out of him. The custody battle drained him, and his reputation was destroyed. Bob wasn't just losing, he was being erased, piece by piece. And the best part, I didn't have to say a single word. The truth was doing all the work for me. The pressure was crushing Bob. No job, no house, no family. And now, an ugly divorce bleeding him dry. He started lashing out, desperate to hold on to anything he still thought was his. One night, things got out of hand. Bob showed up at the house. His wife was staying in her parents' place.
Hi.
He tried to force his way in, screaming, demanding to see the kids. His rage was spilling over, but he wasn't prepared for what came next. Her brother stepped in. This wasn't a heated argument anymore. It was a fight. Bob pushed, and her brother didn't hesitate. One punch later, Bob was on the ground with a broken nose, bleeding and humiliated. Police reports followed. Restraining orders were filed. Bob had officially crossed the line from desperate to dangerous, and now the law was watching him closely. And me? I didn't need to get involved. I just sat back, letting him self-destruct. Every move he made only buried him deeper. His anger had become his own worst enemy. After that violent outburst, Bob's world spun completely out of control. His wife wasn't playing games anymore. She had the police and the courts on her side. The restraining orders were filed, and Bob suddenly found himself walking on thin ice. One wrong step, and the law would be all over him. But Bob couldn't help himself. He kept showing up where he wasn't supposed to, tweeling in public, trying to argue with his wife, refusing to let go. And each time, it ended the same way: flashing lights, police reports, and more charges stacking up against him. Eventually, it wasn't just warnings. Bob got hauled off in handcuffs. Jail time. The man who once strutted around as a VP of sales with a family and a home was now sitting in a cell, treated like the criminal he had become. Word spread quickly. His reputation, already destroyed, was now beyond repair. Nobody wanted to be associated with him. Friends disappeared. Business contacts cut him off. He wasn't just losing his freedom, he was losing the last scraps of respect he had left. Watching it happen, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction. I hadn't laid a hand on him. All I had done was reveal the truth. The rest, that was Bob's own downfall. His choices, his lies, his rage. It had finally caught up with him. After the arrests, the fights, and the endless court hearings, Bob's life became a shadow of what it once was. His name, once tied to a respected family business, is now nothing more than gossip in courtrooms and whispers in town. His wife finalized the divorce, gained custody of the kids, and made sure he stayed far away from them. He had no family left, no career, no home, and now, no reason to stay. And then, almost suddenly, he was gone. No more sightings. No more incidents. No more late-night confrontations. It was like he had evaporated. Some said he left the state, chasing a new start. Others claimed he was living out of his car, drifting from place to place. Nobody knew for sure. And honestly, I didn't care. His life wasn't my concern anymore. My revenge was complete. The man who thought he could sneak into my marriage and walk away untouched was now just gone. A ghost of his former self. Sometimes silence is the loudest ending of all. And for Bob, disappearing into nothingness was the final chapter of his downfall. When the dust finally settled, I looked around and realized something. My life was quiet again. No more secret investigations. No more late nights wondering where she was. No more rage burning in my chest. For the first time in years, there was peace. My divorce had gone through cleanly. I didn't drag it out. I didn't fight her on things that didn't matter. I only cared about the kids, and that was where my energy went. Every decision I made from that point on was about them, protecting them, raising them, giving them the childhood I never had. Meanwhile, my ex-wife faded into the background. Our conversations became short, polite, and only about the kids. No more arguments, no more drama, just distance. And as painful as it once was, I welcomed it. I had done what I needed to do. The truth had been revealed, the consequences had played out, and I was free to build something new. My life wasn't perfect, but it was mine. No lies, no betrayal. It's just a chance to start over. If there's one thing I learned from my own childhood, it's that kids should never pay the price for their parents' mistakes. My parents cheated on each other, and the fallout wrecked my childhood. I refused to let that cycle repeat. So, after the divorce, I made a choice. I didn't argue with my ex about things that didn't matter. I didn't drag her name through the mud in front of our kids. I didn't let my anger spill into their lives. I kept it separate. Our conversations became mechanical: dates, times, schedules. That was it. No warmth, no small talk, just what was necessary for the kids. We weren't friends. We weren't enemies. We were simply co-parents. The kids got the stability they needed, and I got the peace of knowing they wouldn't grow up in the middle of a battlefield. My revenge had already played out. I didn't need to keep fighting. My focus was on them and only them. Revenge gave me closure, but it didn't erase the pain overnight. For months after the divorce, I still caught myself replaying old conversations, remembering her lies, and wondering how long she'd been planning it all. But slowly, something changed. I realized that holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting her to suffer. I didn't want to live in bitterness, but I didn't want to let her mistakes define the rest of my life. So I started letting go, piece by piece. I stopped asking why, because I knew the answer would never be enough. I stopped comparing myself to the man she chose because his life had already crumbled. And I stopped looking back because the future was wide open. Healing wasn't easy, but it was necessary. My revenge story might have been the end of my marriage, but it wasn't the end of me. It was the beginning of a new version of myself, stronger, wiser, and free. Once the chaos settled, I was left with something I hadn't felt in years: freedom. No lies, no excuses, no secrets. Just me, my kids, and a blank slate. At first it was strange. Silence in the house, the absence of her presence felt heavy. But instead of letting it crush me, I decided to rebuild. I focused on creating a life where my kids could feel safe and where I could finally breathe without suspicion hanging over me. I made new routines: weekend trips with the kids, family dinners that were just ours, quiet evenings where I didn't have to wonder where she was or who she was with. Even simple things like picking up new hobbies or reconnecting with old friends reminded me that there was life beyond betrayal. Slowly but surely, the wounds began to heal. The past still existed, but it no longer controlled me. I wasn't the man who was cheated on anymore. I was the man who survived it, who rebuilt, who started fresh. Time has a way of softening even the sharpest wounds. In the beginning, she was always in my thoughts, not because I wanted her there, but because betrayal leaves scars that keep itching long after the cut. But as the years passed, she became less and less a part of my story. Our conversations dwindled to nothing but quick, practical exchanges about the kids. There was no warmth, no lingering feelings, no curiosity about her life. She wasn't my wife anymore. She was just someone I used to know. Every time I looked at her, I didn't see the woman I once loved. I saw the choices she made, the lies she told, and the family she broke, and that made it easier to detach. She became background noise in my life, present, but irrelevant. My world no longer revolved around her mistakes. It revolved around my own growth, my kids, and the future I was building. The day I realized she didn't matter anymore was the day I finally felt free. Looking back, I can honestly say betrayal was the hardest lesson I've ever learned, but also the most valuable. I learned that trust is precious. Once it's broken, it's nearly impossible to restore. I learned that ignoring red flags only makes the crash worse when it finally comes. And I learned that no matter how much you love someone, you can't control their choices. You can only control your response. I also realized the power of resilience. Pain can either break you or build you, and I refuse to let it break me. I chose to turn my suffering into strength, my anger into determination, and my revenge into closure. The biggest lesson: that betrayal doesn't define you. It doesn't mean you're not worthy of love or respect. It just means someone else failed to value you, and that's their loss, not yours. When I think about everything that happened, the lies, the betrayal, the chaos, I don't feel anger anymore. I feel relief. Relief that I walked through hell and came out stronger on the other side. My ex is just a shadow in the past, the man she cheated with. Well, life handled him in ways I never could. That's the thing about revenge, it doesn't always come from you. Sometimes karma is the best avenger of all. As for me, I started fresh. I focused on being the best father I could be, on building a peaceful home, on chasing goals I had once forgotten. And step by step, I found happiness again, not the kind that depends on someone else, but the kind that comes from within. This isn't a story about loss. It's a story about survival, resilience, and the strength to rebuild when everything falls apart. My past may be filled with betrayal, but my future, that's mine to create. And this time I'm building it on trust, honesty, and peace.